Hello friends, welcome back. Today we are starting Unit 5 of Class 6, that is Kingdoms, Kings and Early Republic. Now the question is, how did some men become rulers in those days? Not like today with elections and democracy. In those early times, the process was very different. This is an important question and it tells us how power and authority worked in ancient India. And one important ritual was Ashwamedha, or the horse sacrifice. In this ritual, a horse was let loose to wander. The king's men followed it, and if the horse entered another ruler's land and they followed it to pass, it means they accepted king's authority. But if they stopped the horse, then war was the result. Okay, the Raja who successfully organized the sacrifice was recognized as very powerful, and other rulers had to bring him gifts and acknowledge him as supremacy. And in these rituals, the Raja was the central figure, and the priest performed the ceremonies, and they sprinkled sacred water, and they sang tales of his bravery on the battlefield. These rituals created a divine aura that gave religious sections to his power. Now you may think, why do we study this? Because it shows us that in ancient India, political power was closely linked with rituals and religion. Kingship was not just about fighting battles, it was also about gaining recognition to such ceremonies. Now let's talk about the Varnas. Varna basically means division of society. Many people take it as caste, but in the earlier period it was more about social function. The first Varna was the Brahmins, and they were the priests and the teachers and the people responsible for rituals and for preserving knowledge. The second Varna was Kshatriyas, and these were the rulers and warriors and those who protected the land and led the battles. And the third Varna was the Vaishyas, and they were the farmers, herders and traders, basically the productive classes. And finally, the fourth one is Shudras, and their role was to serve the other three Varnas, and they were denied the right to perform rituals. Now, one very important point here, in those days, both women and Shudras were excluded from studying the Vedas. That shows you how knowledge was restricted, and they were often put at the lower end of society, and this exclusion later became the root of untouchability. So the Varna system tells us how deeply inequality was structured in those times. Okay. Now, let's move to the next stage, that is Janapadas. The Rajas who performed big sacrifices like Ashwamedha Yajna were no longer just simple tribal chiefs. They became rulers of territories, and the land where the Janas, the people, set their feet and settled was called Janapada, and that literally means the foothold of the people. And archaeology gives us the proof of these Janapadas, that is excavations at sites like Puranaquila in Delhi and Hastinapura in Meerut and other have revealed what life was like. And people lived in huts, and they kept cattle and other animals, and they used earthen pots. A very special kind of pottery has been found at these sites. It is called painted grey ware, and the grey colored pots painted with the simple designs. This pottery becomes a cultural marker for early Janapada life. Okay. Now slowly some of these Janapadas grew more and more powerful, and around 2500 years ago we see the rise of Mahajanapadas, literally the great Janapadas. Okay, these were the bigger, stronger and more organized states, and most of them had capital cities, and many of these cities were fortified. Okay, now why build forts? Think for a moment. Obviously for protection, to defend themselves from attack by rival kings. But forts were also a statement of power. To build them required proper planning, a huge supply of bricks or stones, and of course thousands of laborers also. That itself shows how authority was consolidating. The another sign of this phase is use of punch-marked coins instead of only barter or cattle exchange. Now we see the beginnings of money economy. So when we study this transition from Varnas, Janapadas, Mahajanapadas, we are actually seeing how Indian society and politics were evolving. From small tribes to larger states, from barter to coins, from rituals to fortification. This is the story of early state formation in India. And here I want to tell you something practical about preparation also. Many students just keep reading NCERT again and again like a storybook, but that is not enough. For UPSC, you must be smart. Your first reading should be underlining important points. Only in the second reading you should prepare short notes, because in the first reading everything looks important, and if you write notes at that stage, your notes will become just like another textbook. That is a waste. Okay, notes must be sharp, selective and useful for both prelims and mains. Okay. Now let us move on the topic of taxes. So in that time, how were taxes applied? Very simple. The main tax was on crops. Farmers had to give 1/6 of what they produced to the king, and this share was called as Bhaga. And then craftsperson also had to pay taxes in form of their work or produce. The herders had to give animals or dairy products, and merchants were taxes on trade, and even hunter-gatherers had to supply forest produce to Raja. So you can see the state survived because of taxes. Without taxes, there is no army, no fort, no administration. Taxes were the backbone of early states. Okay. Now, let us talk about changes in agriculture. Around this period, two major changes took place. First, the use of iron plowshare, and this allowed deeper cutting of the soil and helped increase productivity, and especially in the fertile but heavy soils of Ganga Valley. Second, the practice of transplanting paddy. Its earlier seeds were just scattered on the field, but now sampling were first grown in nurseries and later transplanted into the field. This method required much more labor but gave much higher yield. Okay. So it was often the slaves and landless laborers, men and women, who had to do this hard work. So economic growth also meant exploitation of weaker section. Now let's take a closer look at Magadha, one of the most important Mahajanapadas. Okay, Magadha rose to great power because of several reasons. It had fertile land of Ganga Valley, perfect for agriculture, and it had iron ore mines in the region of modern Jharkhand, which supplied weapons and tools, and the Ganga and Son rivers gave easy transport and water supply. And importantly, Magadha rulers built strong armies with elephants, which gave them an advantage in battles. Some powerful rulers of Magadha were Bimbisara and his son Ajatasattu, and they expanded Magadha by conquering other Janapadas. Later, Mahapadmananda became another strong ruler who controlled a large empire. This is why Magadha became the base for the rise of Mauryan Empire later. So for UPSC, Magadha is very important. It shows us how geography, resources, and strong rulers together create empire building. Now, the closer look at the Vajji. The Vajji Mahajanapadas had its capital at Vaishali. What is interesting here is that they had a different system of government. It is not a monarchy, but a Gana or Sangha. This means rule by an assembly, not one king, but many rulers together. In fact, thousands of men shared power, and each one was called a Raja. Both Buddha and Mahavira belong to such Gana Sangha traditions. That is why Vajji is important, and it shows that ancient India was not only about kings and dynasties, but also had early experiments with collective rule. And so friends, what we have discussed today is enough for this class, and don't think we are rushing. It's just that in class 6 level, we don't go very deep. We just touch the basics, understand the flow, and then move forward. Later when we study the Tamil Nadu NCERT and also in higher class books, I will explain the same topics in much greater detail, and I will also take separate lecture for that. In the coming classes, you will see how all this connects and continues. So don't feel like a story has ended here. This is just the foundation. Keep learning, keep revising, and everything will fall into place step by step. So that's it for today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you.